Hello, I'm Dr. Gaye Carlson, President of the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, with number 22 of my Screenside chats for our AACAP members. Screenside chats, as you may know, are meant to share timely clinical practice and other information from experts on key topics during the COVID-19 pandemic. Reminiscent of President Roosevelt's fireside chats during the Great Depression and World War II, I'm hoping that they'll be informative and comfortable and fill a niche not addressed by materials otherwise available. The Screenside Chats today explores the grim past of racism in medical research and discusses how this past has been blamed for impeding progress in the current COVID-19 vaccine efforts in African American communities. To remind you, this was a 40-year study where African American men in Macon County, Alabama, were used to study untreated syphilis. Over 600 men were subjects in the study, with nearly 400 cases and 200 controls. And of the 400 cases, 100 died due to a syphilis-related illness. Even after penicillin was found to be an effective treatment, the men were denied it and led to believe they were receiving treatment. The Syphilis Study has been blamed as the reason that African Americans mistrust physicians, are less likely to participate in clinical trials, and less likely to get the COVID vaccine. But many question whether the blame lies with the Syphilis Study. To help us understand this, I'm pleased to have with me Mrs. Lillie Tyson Head and her daughter Carmen Thornton. Many of us know Carmen, who's the Director of Research, Grants and Workforce, and Interim Director of Development at AACAP. You're about to meet her amazing mother. Mrs. Head was born and raised in Tuskegee, Alabama. She's the daughter of the late Johnny May Tyson and Fred Lee. Fred, Lillie's father and Carmen's grandfather, was a subject in the United States Public Health Syphilis Study at Tuskegee. Mrs. Head is a former high school physical and health education teacher, administrator, and community leader. She's retired from the Waterbury, Connecticut school system after 30-plus years of dedicated service and has also held many civic roles. Currently, Mrs. Head is the president of the Voices of Our Father's Legacy Foundation, a 501c3 organization which seeks to transform the legacy of the syphilis study from trauma to triumph through a family-led board of directors. Mrs. Head is a proud alumni of Tuskegee University. She received her master's degree in education from Southern Connecticut State University and a 6-year education administration and supervision certificate from the University of Bridgeport. We're thrilled to have you both to share your knowledge and experience with us. So let's get to the questions and your recommendations about how best to address vaccine hesitancy in Black and Brown communities. But why don't you start out telling us a little bit about Fred, about your father and grandfather.
I'll start with my father. And thank you so much, Dr. Carlson, for having us on your Screenside chat. I truly appreciate us being able to have this time with you. My father was a very honest man, and that's what was so disappointing and disturbing about he being a victim in the study by not knowing, first of all, that he was involved in the study, and also being deceived and lied to. So he was a gentle man, very soft-spoken, easy to anger, and that was very good for me sometimes because I could cause a little disturbances sometimes around. So he was very hardworking, a devoted husband for 52 years. He was in excellent health, and which was also very disturbing because he was very health conscious about his health, his appearance. And he always stayed in good physical shape and encouraged all of his children to stay in good physical shape. He and my mother were devoted to each other. They had a relationship that I think all of their children, my siblings, emulate today. They were married for 52 years, and they pretty well knew what each other was thinking and how each other would react. One of the things that I'd like to share this morning is how my father was a subtle romantic. And that is, he would always make sure that my mom had her birthday card, if not a gift, Valentine's card, but he would always have a little candy with the Valentine card. And he would always have something for her for Mother's Day and for Christmas. So he was very subtle with that, in that, they weren't always holding hands or whatever, but they were very much in love. So my father was our hero, and he was so compassionate and loved everyone.
Well, it sounds like he was a really decent human being. I want to get to the question about how the syphilis study may be impacting the efforts to get Black and Brown Americans vaccinated. But if we have time, I'd like to come back to the question of how he, and I imagine his friends, ended up getting involved in this chapter of a deplorable part of our history. But I think the question about how the syphilis study has been sort of a pall over the efforts to provide some equity when we're smart enough to try to do that now, and how that's getting in the way, or whether in fact it is getting in the way. What are your thoughts about that? Either you or Carmen can answer that.
I think it seems to me that the United States Public Health Service Syphilis Study today has become the poster child for a great deal of the injustices, both medical and social injustices that has happened to African Americans over the years, centuries, since we first came to this country as enslaved people. The study is most recent, and because it is most recent, there's a little more information, albeit that the information, some of it, quite a bit of it, is misleading. It's misinformation about the study. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's causing some hesitancy. Example, some people still believe that the men were injected with the syphilis virus, and they were not injected with the syphilis virus. Some people believe they were told what the study was about. They were not. Some still believe that they were informed, and they were not. So having those three things in the minds of some people will cause a pause. And I understand that, and I respect that. But you have to look further than this study to see why the Black community is hesitant about getting involved with the study. It's the injustices that has happened and the disparities that exist even today in the healthcare field.
So at this point, how do you think we're doing in terms of the vaccine rollout and trying to get it to everybody who wants it? In my thinking on the subject, you've got several layers of people. You've got the people that are going to be right out there up front when anything comes out, they want to try it, whether it's a new car or a new vaccine. And you've got the people that you're not going to get to do it no matter what you do. But then there's a whole bunch of people in the middle who are going to kind of look around and say, let's wait and see about this. What do they need to see in order to feel more comfortable about getting involved, about getting vaccinated? Is it something that we need to do as the healthcare system? Is it something that we need to do in the way of information? What do you think?
Well, I would say a lot of questions that I've heard have to do with safety and knowing that the side effects from the vaccine won't be harmful. 5 years from now, we don't know what can happen because we can't project into the future what will happen in 5 years. So some of the questions and concerns that people have don't have much to do with the syphilis study. But then the ones that do, and there are concerns, it's feeling validation, having people recognize that racism is a problem. I think for years, for generations, things are changing a bit now. People would say that racism doesn't exist in healthcare, but it does. And Black and brown people can feel that and see that. So I think that's a bit of it. I think transparency, is another one, and being open and honest about, plans or why things, impact one community versus another, or, why is the vaccine rollout so much greater in this community over another. I think people watch that. They look at those trends, or they read or see what they hear on the news, and they come to conclusions. And so I think, equitable, transparent communication is really the most important thing.
One of the things I remember listening to, there's a series of podcasts that I listen to that the JAMA, the journal puts out. Interviews with Dr. Bachner, they're called. I hope I meet Dr. Bachner one day. He's a great interviewer. And around last August, there were discussions about, it looks like there may be a vaccine. How are we going to get it to people equitably? And so the public health folks convened, and they came up with a very elaborate and really tried to be as equitable as possible. But I think they ended up falling on their swords, that it ended up being so complicated that it just wasn't possible to do what people wanted it to do. One of the other podcasts they had, which is really, I sent it to Heidi, was one talking about systemic racism as opposed to racism. And it made a really good point. And as a white person, I think, empathize with it. When you talk about racism, it's kind of like you're accusing somebody of being a bigot. When you talk about systemic racism, you talk about all of the policy decisions that have occurred that make things the way they are. So it's more understanding that, nobody's saying, oh, well, we don't want Black people to get the vaccine. We hope they all die. It's that it's a matter of saying, people live in very difficult to reach areas. And that's part of systemic racism. I mean, you pushed them out there and you made it real difficult for the mail to get there. You made it really difficult for people to have transportation. And so it's not surprising that they can't do the things that they would like to be able to do if those policies weren't in place. In any event, that's a little off topic, but I found that an interesting way of thinking about it, because then you really have to attack the policies. It isn't just a matter of how do you get a vaccine into somebody's arm. I don't know. What are your thoughts about that?
I would definitely say that, the argument about systemic racism is an important one. The discussion around it is a really very important one. I'm so glad that people are talking about systemic racism now. As unfortunate as the George Floyd incident was, as unfortunate as all of the deaths that have come about because of COVID, and particularly in Black and brown communities, we're beginning to talk about things that we should have been talking about. And we're starting to implement and enforce policies that should have been implemented 30 or 40 years ago, if not before then. We're having these conversations, even with what the work of the foundation is doing, are being elucidated. And it's so important to have these conversations. It's so important to talk about structural racism, and how it impacts housing and access to care and jobs. We should have been having these conversations a long time ago. And that's what makes things as complicated as they are, because we're talking about a problem that's been around for really centuries, right? And, talking about it and trying to do something that's, trying to impact a problem that's been around really since this country was established. It's not going to happen overnight. It should. But, we're talking about something that's been going on for decades. And we're having the conversations now. It's wonderful that we're having these conversations, but it's going to take a long time to be impactful with something that's been as invasive and sustained as, systemic and structural racism has. And insidious as structural and systemic racism has been.
So is this, the talking about it, I remember when Patrice Harris, did one of the Screenside chats, that was kind of one of the points that she was making as well. So how do you recommend that we build a bridge, or it isn't reassure? I think you have to have trust, okay? And so then how do you get trust? How do you win back trust? How do you build up trust? How do we get to the next step here?
I think one of the most important thing is we have to first of all acknowledge it and take ownership to what has happened, and then look at how we can change it for the better and for the present. But if you don't acknowledge it and don't take ownership for it, then and recognize it, then I don't think we can move forward. But in building trust, you must have, if you say something, I think it should be followed by action. Words are, my parents used to say, words are cheap.
I agree with you.
Words are cheap.
Your mouth is.
Yeah, and we can talk about things all day, but if we're not doing anything to show and demonstrate the words that we're saying, it's meaningless. And in order to have trust, you have to have trustworthiness, and trustworthiness comes about because of your actions and because of the consistency of your actions and what you're doing. I'd like to just say one thing about how the men were recruited, because there's a lesson that we can take from that study, as awful as it was. Those men were in their fields farming. They were at their churches. They were at their Mason meetings. They were at their community gathering places. And the doctors and nurse went to them. They took their information to them and recruited them in those areas. And I think with the vaccine, that's something I'm beginning to see happening with different aspects of the Black community and Brown community in particular. They're beginning to take the information and take mobile units and setting up vaccine centers in those communities. And that's a way of doing the best, doing the very best to get the word out about the vaccine and the importance of taking the vaccine, as well as meeting the people where they are, rather than having the people always have to come to them. We have to meet people where they are in order to get things done the right way. And that is a action point that can lead to trustworthiness, which could lead to trust.
And while you're there at the meeting points, building trust also means respecting, people. There's respect, and I think in healthcare and in a lot of other institutions, people feel as though there is no respect. In fact, they feel disrespected. And to build trust, there has to be respect.
So to just go back to the syphilis study, what you're saying is their strategy for recruitment was good. It was just that their message was dishonest.
Right. Absolutely.
Well, isn't that even a little bit chilling then? I don't know that turning it on its head and saying, well, you have to come to me is going to make it any better. But boy, that would really, that's the Trojan horse there. I mean,
It truly, you're absolutely right. Everything about the study, from the recruitment to the study was supposed to only last for a few months and went on for 40 years. Even after penicillin was found to be, an effective treatment for penicillin, the men who had it, they couldn't even get the treatment from, other places. They were kept from the treatment because people would see or know in their record that they were a subject in the syphilis study. From start to the very end of the study, everything about it was chilling and heinous, truly.
Yeah. I have to say, just on a personal, let me just say, on a personal level, I'm sure when you do research, there's a whole series of things that you have to read about and good clinical practice and so forth and so on. And this, of course, is one of them. It has been so much more meaningful for me and I had to get this renewed personally about 3 months ago. It has been so much more meaningful to me to have you and to have had this experience. And when we had dinner together in Dallas just about a year ago. Do you realize that, Carmen?
Can you believe we were in Dallas a year ago? Oh my gosh, when we went to dinner, yeah, we had a long talk.
Yeah, well, in any event, after that, I think that your foundation is an amazing way to transform. Even though you read something, and I like to think of myself as a decent person, right? And I can read that and I can say, God, that's really horrible. I mean, there's a lot of horrible things that we've done, some of it out of ignorance. I mean, we have changed as a humanity. We have changed. I mean, things come along and you look at them and you say, my God, how could we have done these things? We did. So, the point is, can you reform? Can you change? Can you learn from the experience? But I will tell you personally that knowing you and looking at your website and listening to what you have to say has been really transformative. And so I really support the things that you're doing. And you wanted to tell us a little bit more about what you were doing. And talk about your website and so forth. So this is a good time to do it. Why don't you share some of that information?
Thank you. Yes, I would like to share how the foundation got started. We started in 2014 by descendants, which I think is something quite unique and remarkable in itself, is that descendants of the men came together and we formed the foundation to uplift and transform their legacy. Because the primary reason was we didn't want our fathers' narrative to be left that they were only poor sharecroppers, uneducated guinea pigs, because they were more than that. They were beloved men. They had families. They were fathers, brothers, sons, and uncles and grandfathers and so forth. We didn't want that. They had a legacy, and we wanted to share that. The other reason was we wanted to honor their sacrifices and their contributions to the medical world. So we were looking at telling their stories, because in all of the medical books and journals and everything that had been written, there was no information about the men and how it had impacted them and how it had impacted their lives. And we needed to tell their stories so that we could include that information. So we started a research project, and the research project is titled The Untold Stories. And we're interviewing descendants.
A research project.
Yes. Yeah. We're interviewing the descendants and sharing their short stories and telling how the study has impacted actually generations, and even now as we're seeing impacting people's viewpoint on whether or not to take the vaccine. So we wanted to do that. So that's one project. The other project that we want to do is to build an inspiration and memorial garden to honor the men at Tuskegee University at the Bioethics Center. And the Bioethics Center came about or was partially funded to get started from the apology given by President Clinton at the time. So we want to build, and that memorial garden will be an inspirational garden for others to come read about the study, learn about the study, as well as learn about the men within the study. And to inspire them not to let anything happen again. In addition to that, the garden will provide a space for healing and for reflection. If we don't reflect on something, it's kind of difficult for us to begin to move forward in a positive manner. And then we also give scholarships, and the scholarship application is on the website, and it's for descendants. And the reason we're giving those scholarships, we want to encourage more of the descendants to go into the medical field and to medical research and the healthcare. We want to encourage that, so we provide the scholarships. And then we're doing things just as we're doing this morning, is reaching out and telling the stories and encouraging others where we can, advocating for better healthcare and social justices. So I would like for everyone to visit our website, and you could reach out to us. We have our email address, and any comments we would appreciate.
So we'll post the website at the end of this talk. You know, as you were talking, I was thinking of the plants that grow back after a forest fire. That I think that it's a really such a nice idea to do what you're talking, because when you put humanity onto something that has happened, it does transform the experience from being a sterile, 40 people did this and 37 people did that, to these were people, or these are people, because this, of course, research is continuing to go on. And I also find it very uplifting to think about, those were people, fathers, grandfathers, people. That was how big an organization are you? How many people are there?
Well, we're only 7 years old this year. It will be 7 years old. But we have, and the membership is open to anyone that supports our, that would like to support our mission and become advocates for what we're trying to do within our mission. We have now, I would say, maybe about 75 people on the membership roll, but we are hoping to grow and grow and grow, because I see my vision for this now, especially after we have gotten, I guess the best words for it is caught up in the vaccine and being referred to so much. I see us as a place to begin to build a bridge from mistrust to trust. And that comes about by telling the truth, being transparent, working with others, with other organizations and the medical world, and start coming together and building that bridge so that we can move from mistrust to trust within the Black community, the Black and Brown community.
And I think that's a really great note to end on. I had been looking forward to this discussion, and you've lived up to it, and it's been really beautiful to listen to what you've been doing. Your daughter is Jewel, I guess, is your name. Is that right?
My name is Jewel, and I named my daughter Jewel too. Her
I know
name.
she did, because I remember her name before she was Thornton. I remember she was Carmen Jewel Head. Anyway, a real jewel, both of you. And so,
well, thank you.
Thank you very much for being on, and thank you to our audience for listening. And we'll see you next time on Screenside Chats. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a good day.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all very much for tuning in. This is Gaye Carlson for AACAP's Screenside Chats.
AACAP provides Screenside Chats as a member in public service, but it is neither a legal interpretation nor a statement of AACAP policy. Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by AACAP. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their participation in Screenside Chats does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. Views and opinions expressed by guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of AACAP or any of its officials.